What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cruz Report. This is episode number 5, baby. And we're going to split this into 2 parts because I think this one's going to be a little longer and maybe not as funny. I'm going to give you my dive into my life, man, and who I am. There's a lot of people that, like me, don't like me, whatever the case may be. But, I've made a lot of good connections over the years. And I think it's important to share my story so you can understand a little bit more of why I am the way that I am. And I'm going to try to do it as fairly because I think when you dive into your past, I think sometimes you remember things differently than, say, your mom would or your sister or your brother because it's through your viewpoint. But I'm going to do my best to tell the story as unbiased as I can. And I'm going to leave out some details because some things that happened that were good, bad, or indifferent are not my story to tell, So, but anyway, most of you know me. I'm Joseph Cruz. I own Breaking the Game. I own Damos. I'm at Damos Sports. I'm the majority owner there. Our sports card store. We do breaks online, all of that. And we've done some TikTok stuff. We started the YouTube stuff. If you guys get a chance, truly, I would love you to like our videos, comment on them, but subscribe, man. That's going to help me continue to keep growing this thing and maybe push to new heights. And at some point, we're going to do more than just these sit downs. We're probably sometime March, April, we're going to start getting content in the shop a little bit more, maybe some golf stuff, and kind of branch out from where we are now. But I thought it was important for you guys to know who Brett was and Aaron was and Letty was. I've got other guys that I want to bring on here. Joe Chero will be on here eventually. Derek Weatherly will be on here eventually. So you guys can kind of see the entire gambit of the team that I work with. But I thought it was very important for me to share my story. So I was born in 1983, Fayetteville, North Carolina. My mom was a teen mom, 16 years old when she had me. She married an older fella. Times were different back then. I don't know much about him, but the stories that I've heard, not a great guy. Pretty abusive, pretty rough. And just not somebody I think that was meant to be in my life for a long time. God has a special way of working those things out. So I was born in 83. My mom kind of dealt with it. She got pregnant again, I want to say, when she was 18, had my brother at 19. And somewhere in there, my mom had a group of friends, a lady named Julie, who's still near and dear to my heart. And Julie and Bob, Bob wasn't in the picture then. I'll tell you about Bob later. Julie and her parents, Claudette and Bill, kind of took me in. And Claudette and Bill would babysit me. Julie would babysit me, really help my mom out. They eventually become my godparents, which I'll explain to you about those later. But an absolute godsend. Really, really helped my mom at a time when she really needed it. And she was young, free childcare, watched me all the time. And as I grew up, my brother was born in 86. So Josh, that was my only sibling that I grew up with at that time. We moved quite a bit, to different areas, just kind of bouncing around Fayetteville. I think I went to maybe 4 different elementary schools, until we settled in. My mom got remarried, to another gentleman, which he again was not a very good, guy. He did some really bad things. But eventually, it's just me, my mom, and my brother were kind of living on our own. We growing up, I was always a good kid. I think I was always afraid to get in trouble. Like, I didn't really push the envelope like my brother did. Josh, he pushed the envelope. He was the daredevil. He was the jump off the couch, jump off the roof. We were playing hide and go seek one time, and we were with Bob and Julie, my godparents, daughter and her husband. And we chased Josh all the way up to the 3rd level of a beach house that we're staying at. We're on vacation with them. And Josh, in order to not get caught, he jumps off the 3rd level of this beach house to the ground and bit a hole in his tongue. Like, that's just who he was, man. He was crazy. But anyway, so we grew up, I want to say probably 5th or 6th grade. I don't remember, but at some point my mom divorced my stepdad, and that didn't really bother me a ton because I didn't really have that bond with him like Josh did. He beat the shit out of me a couple times. I had bruises all the way down my ass to where like I actually wore pants. I mean, he was just different. But Josh and him bonded really well, and I think Josh liked that fatherly, whatever. So when they split, David ended up going to Kuwait to do some contracting during and this was probably 92, 93 during the Desert Storm era, and never came back. So it was just me, my mom, Josh, and Josh kind of started acting out a little bit more and showing up and getting in trouble in school and some of those things. And I think my mom did everything she possibly could with the tools that she had. She was working her ass off. I think at that time she had went back to school because she never graduated high school, went back, got her associate's degree, and became a correctional officer, and just doing everything she could to provide. But I don't know. Josh was he was wild, man. He was doing a lot of stuff that she didn't know about, and we had a lot of free time because she was working. A lot of times she was working two jobs. She'd be working as a correctional officer, and then she'd also be taking care of I don't know the right terminology, but people that were in a group home that had mental disorders that could not live on their own. So she would bring this chick named Lynette over, and Lynette was schizophrenic. And we'd watch her, like my mom would finally get some rest, so we'd hang out with her. But she was always working, so we kind of had a lot of free time to do whatever we wanted to do. You know what I mean? And Josh would just find a way to, as he got older, it would start with getting into fights or that type of stuff, and eventually, it got to the point where he would break into houses, he would do other things, at a young age and getting himself in trouble. So fast forward probably middle school era, and I think we both kind of went through our own, trying to figure things out. I remember at one time, 7th grade, I was in academically gifted, and it's right around when David had left. And we just had so much freedom, and there was so much going on, so much confusion, and like what's going on, that I remember having to go to like tutoring in 8th grade, being forced to because I just wasn't doing my schoolwork. Like, it was. I think there was love in the house. There was everything that you needed, but there was definitely some hard times. Our family, had a tendency to be probably a little more violent than most families. My mom, she grew up. She had 4 brothers I wouldn't say she raised them, but she definitely was when grandma or grandpa weren't there, and that's a whole nother story. They got divorced long ago. Grandpa was, I believe, in Vietnam and also the Korean War, where he met my grandmother. She ends up coming here. They start their family, and he just had a drinking problem. He was an alcoholic pretty good, and it just didn't work out. So she ends up, raising her brothers and sisters for the most part. So at a young age, she had already all that pressure on her. Then she, gets pregnant, has us. But we moved around. We finally got our house in an area called Aaron Lakes, which was a beautiful house. This is like mid-90s. And, it was cool, man. We had a neighborhood. We had kids to play with, and we didn't necessarily have the nicest of nice stuff. We had everything that we needed, but, we definitely had our struggles. My mom had a van that she'd drive, and this sumbitch probably had, she could tell you better than I would, but probably 250,000 miles on this thing. She drove that thing the entire time I could ever remember growing up, and it broke down and had its problems, but that was all we had. So she kept fixing it, and she kept working it in. As we got a little bit older, my mom dated a gentleman, and he was pretty good to us. He was definitely an alcoholic, but he got us. He was into sports. He liked watching football on Sundays. He liked his drinking and that. But a guy named Marty, and Marty was there for probably a good 2 years in that me going to like high school era with Josh, and Josh and him again bonded pretty well. They had some scraps, no doubt. Josh and him would fight, and Marty would bite him on his side. Josh would try to hit him I remember one time he tried to hit him with a bottle of hot sauce in the middle. I'm talking like the Texas Pete like glass bottle, and he threw it so hard the sumbitch stuck in the wall, and the only thing sticking out was the top. But I mean, my mom, she would get into it with her brothers and sisters. I think that parenting mentality that she had, she's always looked out for them since they were little, and when they got into their 20s and mid-20s and they weren't doing things necessarily the way that she felt as that motherly figure, she'd let them know, and they'd let her know, that ain't none of your fucking business. And all of a sudden, we'd be at a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, and we got a fucking Royal Rumble going on. So So I remember, even back then just being anxious. Like anytime we had a family get together, like I know this bitch is about to end in a WWE brawl. But that's just, you don't know anything different. That's what I knew as life. You know what I mean? And until I became an adult and I like saw other families have arguments and they didn't like punch each other, that's when I was like, all right, maybe our shit was a little weird. But I mean, a lot of love there. It sounds weird because fighting your brothers and sisters at an adult age it is not probably typical. That's just how our family rolled, man. It might be the Korean in us. I have no idea, but definitely short tempered. So I had we go to middle school, and I'm jumping around a lot. So hopefully you guys are following. I had 4 uncles: Billy, Stevie, Johnny, Bobby, in that order. The oldest, Bobby, kind of did his own thing. He got into some trouble. He was gone for quite a bit. Johnny hopped off right away, and we'd hang out with Johnny quite a bit when we were younger. He went to the military, went to NYU to business school, so he was gone. Billy went off to college and left. He went to Chapel Hill, actually, and then transferred, I think, to Charlotte with what would end up becoming his wife. So Stevie was probably more like a father figure at that point than anybody else because he was there. Steve kind of went into the workforce right away. We'd go to the gym. Steve would take us with him. We'd have sleepovers at Steve's house. Anytime we go to his house and he has some extra clothes, we didn't have the nicest shit, and he'd have like a Tommy Hilfiger shirt he'd give us. Like, we felt like we were kings, man. We were rich. So I definitely enjoyed those times. And in between there, every summer I would still go back. Claudette and Bill, who I'd mentioned earlier, and Julie had moved to Virginia, and Julie ended up marrying a guy named Bob. Absolutely one of the greatest human beings you'll ever meet. This guy has so much charisma and so much likability, and he never talks bad about anybody. That Bob is just one of those stand-up dudes, man. So I loved Claudette and Bill, and I loved going there. It was kind of a safe place for me, where like at home, my mom was a little more rigid and a little more strict. We weren't playing outside late. We weren't going to parties. We weren't, doing those type of things. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that she was a prison guard, right? And the fact that Josh was kind of teetering on that line of getting in trouble. So she was going to be like, you know what? I'm drawing a line in the sand. You guys, she literally leave us chores every day. And I don't mean little fucking chores. I mean, like, one of us would have to cut the front and backyard. The other person's painting the fucking living room. Like, it was in depth. Like, it kept us busy. So when I went to Claudette and Bill's, that was more like what I had envisioned, at what a childhood would feel like. Claudette and Bill, we would do some stuff or help with some dishes, but for the most part, it was like wake up, eat some breakfast and go play all day. They had a community swimming pool we were at. Like, I'd play till it was dark. We had total freedoms, and it was just being kids, man. And I don't know how many of you will watch this, but I made lifelong friends in Stephen and Lee. They lived right near us. I would hang out with them every fucking summer. Armand Staten, hung out with him for a couple summers. He's on my Facebook. I don't know if he'll see this, or Stephen and Lee. Ben Shipley, like guys that just, it's kind of hard to explain, but if you've ever seen the movie Stand By Me, it was that feeling. And I don't know how to put that into words, but it was utterly just on an adventure being kids, man. And those were some of the greatest moments in my life. So pretty much every summer till I was probably 15, I went there. And from the time I was 18 months old there, I went some Christmas breaks. I spent a ton of time with them, and it also gave my mom the freedom for 3 or 4 months to not have kids around. She'd been raising kids since she was a kid, since she was 16, since she was 19. And so I'm sure it gave her a nice little break too, where she didn't have to run us to sports, or she didn't have to worry about us doing this or that, So Josh would spend some summers with me. He'd spend some summers with Bobby. For the most part, I was in Virginia almost every summer until I got a girlfriend. So I'd go, I had Bob and Bill. Bill would take me fishing. Claudette was that nurturing kind of mother, grandmother type very caring. I remember like even up to probably 10 or 11, like they would sleep in their bed and I would sleep on their floor in there and just watch HBOs. We didn't have HBO at home. I'd watch the fuck out of it. I'd even watch it after like 2 a.m. But so anyway, I go back, and in between there, like, I'd be gone for the summer. I'd come back home, kind of get readjust a little bit because the rules were definitely a lot different growing up in our house versus being at, Claudette and Bill's or Bob and Julie's. But I would always leave there refreshed. Like, I would always want to be like Bob, and I would always want to talk like Bob and act like Bob because he just was a gravitational pull for people. Everybody liked him. He didn't talk bad about anybody. He was funny. He was charismatic. He was a good time. Nothing negative with this dude. So it's almost like my battery would be recharged and I'd go back home and I'd be motivated. I'd want to get good grades. I'd want to do good in school. I'd want to do good in sports, so, and we'd played sports our whole life, mostly rec. I mean, we didn't have the money, nor do I think at that time we were probably good enough to play like AAU or anything else. But mostly rec ball, playing with our boys in the neighborhood, that type of shit. Anytime you had a baseball or a stick with a tennis ball, I mean, we made our own games. We did our own things. We played hide and go seek. Somewhere in this time frame, a family, the Etheridge family, moved in down the road. They're from Houston, Texas, and they were definitely from Houston, Texas. And out of that, they had Miss Cynthia, which always treated us so good. Mr. Roger, who always, I think he hated me. But they had Tamika and Omar, which were brother and sister, which I wasn't as close with. But Roderick, I definitely developed a bond with. And I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So you got to remember the influence is a little bit different. I dressed a little bit more urban and a little bit more, try to be a little more, hood. And we did. We lived on Bunts Road for a while. We moved around in these other places. When we finally moved to Aaron Lakes, it was actually a nice neighborhood. It's probably run down a little bit different now, but we didn't have to worry about a ton of crime, probably your normal stuff, so we could just be kids. Get into high school, at Marty and my mom kind of not, off and on. Marty moves to his other place. We visit him for a little bit. I think she was just getting tired of it, to be honest with you, because Marty had a drinking problem. And he wasn't always terrible when he drank. He just drank too much every day and every weekend. I mean, that's just who he was. When he left, Josh, again, I think really started to kind of get into his own things a little bit more. When Marty was there, Josh was into wrestling. He was playing football. Marty would go to all the games. My mom would go to all the games. And, when Marty left, I think it was right when Marty was leaving, Josh had just won a state championship in South Carolina, which was a dual state championship, North and South Carolina, for AAU wrestling. So he went in a year of never wrestling in his life and getting pinned to winning a state championship in his AAU, career for both the states. So on a really good path. And then, I'm in high school, I'm playing football. And again, I didn't really ever commit a ton to it. I don't think a lot of people realize how young I was. So I was always a year or almost two behind everybody else. And I mean, I'll tell you, my senior year, I started my senior year at 16. So I started school young, and then I was in academically gifted. And I don't know what happened or how it happened or if it was just different back then. But I pretty much was the youngest of anybody ever in any sport and anything we did. And, I was probably a little bit later of a bloomer as far as puberty went. So I just never really cared about it. I liked being with the guys and I liked goofing off more than I liked giving my all. But I was decently athletic. I mean, I'm not going to tell you I was going to go to the NFL, but I played football, started some, rode the bench some. I just wanted to be there with my buddies, didn't really care. And met a girlfriend, which would have been my high school sweetheart, super nice girl, good family, all of that stuff. And it kind of changed a little bit of I wouldn't go to Claudette and Bill's in the summer. I wanted to stay there a little bit more. Going into my junior year, instead of playing football, I just got a job. I wanted Jordans and I wanted nice stuff and I wanted good money. And in order to do that, I needed to work. You know what I mean? So I would go work at Hardee's, which is where pretty much everybody worked at. It was on the corner of Skybo and Rayford Road. And Roderick worked there. Tamika worked there. At some point, I want to say probably my 8th grade year. It was just me and Josh, and my grandma came down and brought 2 Korean kids who we just thought they were coming for the weekend, and we named them Jenny and Jay. I don't remember Jenny's real name. I know Jay's name was Chae Hyuk Ri. But anyway, they ended up staying with us. Like, grandma left, was like, Susan, my mom, can you take care of them? She's like, I don't think so. I barely get by with what we're doing. But she took on 2 more kids. And then Sarah, who was technically my aunt, which we always called each other cousins because I was older than her. My grandma had her really late and my mom had me really young, also lived with us. So, we go from it just being me and Josh, and kind of, doing our thing, to having another boy in Jay, who was the oldest. Jenny was second oldest. I was third oldest. And then Sarah was in between me and Josh. So now we had 5 kids living at home. And honestly, it was like having 3 other brothers and sisters. Yeah, we were cousins or uncles and whatever the fuck you want to call it. But we lived like brothers and sisters. That's what we did. I mean, any struggle we had, we shared it together. Any success we had, anything fun, we did it together. And of course, we had your usual fights and fusses and all that. But it was really cool having 2 older siblings now. Jay started to drive. Jenny started to drive. And we could go do shit. We go to Hardee's. We go to the movies. You know what I mean? And it was probably a big relief on my mom as well. So get into high school. Jenny and Jay, I think they lived with us until Jay graduated. And then Jay and Jenny ended up moving in with my Uncle Billy. Just, it's just tough. I mean, they were coming from Korea. They literally spoke no English. My mom was very strict and at times probably a little hard on us, and deservedly so. I mean, we would get in trouble and do silly shit. But anyway, so Jay and Jenny end up moving out. Sarah ends up moving out. I think they stayed maybe 4 years or so. And then somewhere like my sophomore, junior year of high school, they were all gone. So it's just me and Josh again. And, I'll never forget this. Josh and a guy, he had befriended a couple guys. One of them still friends with his day, Andre. Andre always was like another brother to us, treated us well. Dre stayed with us for a little bit. My mom couldn't deal with Josh and him getting in trouble, so then Dre had to leave. And this would have been my senior year. So Josh was a freshman, I was a senior. And I remember there was a bunch of bomb threats going off at school. And I mean, like, daily. Like, for a week straight, we'd have a bomb threat in the morning, a bomb threat in the afternoon, a bomb threat in the evening. Like, nobody's getting any class done. And, of course, as kids, we're all like, fuck yeah. I didn't realize it was my brother doing the bomb threats. My brother had broken into houses in the neighborhood, had a little map in the attic of the houses he had broken into where he X'd them off, and had a shitload of stolen stuff in there. And I mean, I knew he was going out and like doing his thing and sneaking out at night. I just didn't know what he was doing. And how he got caught was he stole a cell phone and he was using this cell phone to call in the bomb threats from the bathrooms in school. Well, we don't know the technology. They trace it back. I mean, when you call in a bomb threat, the FBI is coming out, especially multiples. You got the fire department. You got like bomb response guys from the police state. Like, there's a lot of community support that comes out to do that. And I bet you he called in 7 to 10 that week. So they trace the calls, they narrow it down. They know this person's calling from the bathroom, and eventually he gets caught with the phone at school. When he gets caught, they trace it back to that's the phone calls that made the bomb threats. Now they go to our house and they find all of this stuff in his room that's stolen. And anyway, to make a long story short, I literally that day I ride the bus with him and everybody's cool and it's good. And that afternoon I came home knowing, and everybody in the school knew, that he got arrested for doing it, and he's not on the bus with me. And when I come home, of course, my mom's in tears and in shambles, and they took Josh right away, and literally he never came home after that. He got detained right away. They held him without bond, and within probably 2 weeks. They had sentenced him to the only level 3, which is the highest max you can get for a youth in North Carolina, which was in like Kingston, North Carolina somewhere. And that was the start of kind of my brother's life and where he, where things went. I will end this part 1 now, and you guys will catch part 2 next week. Again, brought to you by Creative Brands. Give us a follow, baby, please. They won't all be sit-downs, and they won't all be about our life, but give us a follow, give us a like, and we will see you next week with episode number 6. Thank you.